All right, guys, we'll get underway. And as we said last time, Paddles Up is a new initiative that we're doing. And ideally, it's to upskill our members in the areas that you highlighted as a need of upskilling and identified in the various health checks. Paddles Up will occur, as we mentioned last time, the first week of each month. And we'll touch on important topics that apply to all our members. Paddles Up will take a challenging topic and try and break that down into simple, practical tips on how to apply it to your club. So the topic tonight, as it says there, is really relevant, given that Dragon Boats New South Wales has actually launched its new strategic plan. So tonight we're talking organisational planning, how to set it up for success. And this subject matter expert is Roger Norton. Roger, and I can guarantee this, has a passion for people, planning, performance. He has expertise in strategic and business planning, workshop facilitation, leadership development, organisational cultural change, and organisational performance. His first career was actually in the Royal Australian Navy, where he spent 10 years specialising in maritime logistics in Australia and overseas. And then from there, he became the internal consultant working on strategic and business planning, leadership development, and organisational cultural change. He completed his Navy career in the rank of commander and became the head of corporate development for the Navy National Logistics Organisation. Since leaving the Navy, he's continued his consulting career, working with major niche management consulting business. His client lists include national and international organisations in construction, professional services, including Big Four accounting and Tier 1 legal, professional membership associations, not-for-profit service providers, and NSOs, telecom, as well as online retail, financial services, and food. He's worked extensively in federal, state, and local government sectors. These services he's been providing, not only, as I mentioned before, is in Australia, but it's international, a lot of the Americas, Asia, and the Pacific. He's very familiar with Dragon Boats New South Wales, having spent the last 3 years on the board as our independent director, and has helped us develop 2 strategic plans, but importantly, helped us achieve many of the first. He's also familiar with our club operations, having spent a lot of time with many of our clubs, and recently also facilitating club workshops for their strategic plan. So I'd like to welcome, for those who don't know Roger, Roger Norton.
Jane, thank you. Hopefully you can hear me clearly, and I'm also hoping that on your screen, I've got it on my right-hand side here, is a PowerPoint presentation. My aim here tonight is to walk through really quickly what it is we can focus on as a plan for a Dragon Boat Club. We may have other people here who are separate or in other organisations, welcome if that's the case, but the focus is really around Dragon Boat Clubs inside Dragon Boats New South Wales. My experience, thanks Shane for the long introduction, I spend a lot of time working with organisations, what's important, where do we focus, how do we get traction? So I'm hoping to share some of that experience and perspective with you. There are handouts of this PowerPoint presentation. There's another document for clubs as well in Word format. So you're going to get a tool to take away with that you can use. And as we've said at the outset, keen to have questions posed on chat, and we'll make this as interactive as possible. I know some people have gone off the screen, gone black, I get that. But I'll try, if you want to say something, throw your hand up, let's get involved. So I'm just going to give you a rough over the top of why the heck do this. You know, we're in COVID times. It'd be easy to argue that it's all too difficult, it's too hard, don't bother. I happen to take a view that's contrary to that, probably not surprising. I actually think that a plan is a really valuable tool, and particularly in times of COVID and uncertainty, I think it's even more valuable. For me, it gives a really clear sense of purpose and direction. It helps us to work out what we might choose to pursue. It doesn't have to be precise and linear in just one thing, but you might just narrow in a bit and say, here's a range of options we want to focus on. It also gives you a basis to go, actually, we're not going to do this because we want to focus broadly over there. So a plan is sometimes valuable for what it doesn't include as much as what it does include. A plan and then its execution behind it, it's a reason to build momentum and success. You get a sense of, oh, that worked, let's do some more. And this gathers momentum. The flip side, of course, is if it doesn't work, we've overreached, and we'll come back to that later on, then it deflates the enthusiasm to pursue new ideas. So I prefer it was a positive experience, that builds momentum and success. And we'll talk about how we sequence the activities, but you want it in a way actually that I'll do this, then this, and break it into bite-sized chunks. Nothing particularly new in this. You do it in other facets of your club and your life. Let's just make it work here. For my view, a club plan is not a set and forget thing. I do this with organisations and go, it's a starting point for learning and adapting. What do we learn out of the first round of activity? What do we get surprised by? And how do we make it different round two? And we learn and adapt. So in fact, for me, a plan is a starting point, and then you can grow it out as your experience dictates. And it's a great way for engaging with your members and your stakeholders. So if you're sitting on the committee and you're having this planning event, and I'll come to this, you can engage your members with getting input to the process. Yes, a small group might do the thinking and the writing. Then you go back to your members and go, hey guys, this is what we were thinking. This is where we've landed, the decisions we've reached, and so forth. And it's a great engagement. And equally with stakeholders, you'll be going on, knocking on doors, I'm guessing, of potential sponsors, new members, other sources of money. It could be, local sports clubs or whatever else. When you've got a plan, you look like you're measured and you're structured, and it looks like you're a little bit in control of where you want to go, and you can help them fit into your plan, rather than, hey, can you give me some money to support sponsorship? This is a far more productive basis to a really neat conversation. So you've got a club plan as the focus of this conversation. In a sense, over the top of it, we've taken a whole of Dragon Boats New South Wales approach to create a strategic plan. And in corporate land or government land, wherever you are, you'll have this logic of a strategic plan, business unit plans. Oh, welcome someone. This is broadly the same. And so I'm going to run through quickly the strategic plan for Dragon Boats without overcooking it. Give you a sense of that's what we're aiming for as a sport in New South Wales, and then you can work out which parts of that you want to grab onto in your club, because your context will be different possibly to another club. We use this same process with the board starting in February. So yes, it took a bit longer than I'm going to suggest in a moment, but it's exactly the same process. How do you engage? How do you get people involved? How do you think about some of these topics? Get stuff down, get underway. And overall, the aim there on the screen is we want to create viable, sustainable clubs supporting a growing sport. And we want it to be done in alignment with the values of this sport. In the middle of COVID, there are clubs, and you'll hear this, that are struggling for money or members, lost their direction. I'm going to suggest to you, we haven't in Dragon Boats. In fact, this is an opportunity to grasp, because at the end, we've got 60 clubs now or thereabouts. There's some others are in prospect wanting to come and join. We want to keep growing this sport. It is such a fabulous opportunity. And the last piece of the puzzle here on this slide is there is a strategic plan out. You'll find it on just type in, as I did this afternoon, DBNSW Strategic Plan 2020-2024, and it'll come up for you in your browser. So what I'm about to show you, you can access and share around your club. So I think planning is valuable. I think in context, it's really valuable. And even in moments of turbulence around COVID, for example, people are saying to me in my professional work, can we just put that off? And I say to them, well, actually, there's three scenarios that are pretty plausible for COVID. One is it's like it is now. The other end of the scale we're all hoping for is a vaccine's developed and we can deal with it fairly quickly. And there's a scenario in the middle, which is probably no vaccine and it will take some time. And we'll just learn to adapt even better as we are now. And so in each of those three scenarios, you could plan a bit of how that might impact your club. And then you could find some common elements in your plan in each of the scenarios and build them into your plan. So I don't see COVID as a particular concern in the long term. Yes, short term, it causes issue. In the long term, 2024, at the end of a cycle of planning that might last that long, you're going to look back at 2020 and go, remember that funny year? Well, we're well on the other side of that. And pandemic histories, many of them finish within 2 or 3 years. So 2024, we're through it. So let's aim for 2024. And here, now let me share with you really quickly, is what we're trying to do as the overarching document. Then I'll get into your club level. So this is the one that Shane mentioned, that's just been launched at the AGM. There's some words there that are interesting around context. It's about being ambitious. We actually think this is the time to really stretch and go for opportunity and growth, not to cower in the corner. That's what that says. We describe the future, and some of these future elements might fit for your club. And on the left there, we try to explain what it's like. And so if you're a member or a prospective member, here's a sense of what we think the future of the sport might look like, around pathways for members and supporters and volunteers, different and engaging new events. We want to build a dynamic, not just what we've done really well. It's an and conversation. As I've mentioned before, we want sustainable clubs. I'm sorry, we're in a legal world where governance is important, and so we need to make sure we've got that right. I think there's a commercial opportunity. Some clubs are grasping it, others not so well. Where is the commercial opportunity in the sport? Because it's an attractive sport that's easy for organisations to get on with team building. We've got to use technology, and the club challenge, all clubs doing the 500 metre, Shane, is an example of technology and new events, but we've got to build technology into this, and we need to have strong partnerships. So there's a sense of the future. Things we think are important are on this slide here. Our culture is one of them. Our sense of community is really, really important. We need to bring it together, and it distinguishes from other sports with maybe have a fractured approach. And I'd leave you with a challenge to go, what's your legacy in this sport? If you play into this place for 5 or 10 years, what's your legacy? How will your club be at the end of your involvement? Have you brought new members in? And we think that's a really important thing to think about, the now and the future. So we'll keep rolling through the plan. Values are written there, writ large on the red page. These are the things we hold absolutely essentially important. And I would suggest to you in your particular club, you'll have variations on that, but I would recommend to you that the headings of performance, integrity, community and camaraderie, fun and passion and innovation should apply equally at all levels of the sport. At this point, it's pretty preamble. It's all very pretty, but you'll see on this right-hand side of this slide here, and if you can expand your screen, maybe you can see that. The board then decided to think, what are the key strategies that we think are really important here? And under the 3 red headings of community, business and our governance, and the goals under that about members, paddling community, our events, assets and infrastructure, brand, our performance, financial and commercial, and our people and systems. And so there's a series of strategies here that in some way apply just at Shane and the board level, others apply at club level. And so the opportunity, this becomes a reference document for you in your club planning, because you can go, actually, we can do a few of those. Our version of that here locally in Port Macquarie looks like this. All of us will have some common things around recruitment, events, safety, and so forth, but you can find things to choose from. And down below in the bottom half, how we might measure this. And I'm going to invite you to contemplate that when you put something up the top, you've got to put stuff down the bottom. How are we going to measure what we're doing as a plan? Because that helps us to learn and to adapt and to take away emotion and opinion and get down to facts. So choices there, strategies and performance indicators. And here, this is you asked the question, Shane, earlier about how do you execute a plan? If I go back up to that, I've been in lots of organisations that have magnificent plans, and it stops about here. What we've done here in Dragon Boats, and I suggest it to you, and I'll give you a version of this, is to go, okay, well, let's break it down. If phase 1 on that massive previous page was this, what does phase 1 of activity look like? These are foundation steps. And if we get through that, phase 2. Okay, so we can sequence, we can step out activity without it trying to boil the ocean, good consultant phrase, trying to get too ambitious and getting disappointed. Here's a couple of phases of activity that we can just sequence. And you could do them by year, you could do them by other cycles of time, but it's a step through, be progressive and be real. All of this is about aspiration grounded in reality. I've been a president of a sports club with 1,000 registered players in 6 sports, and I learned really strongly the value of volunteers in a club. I also learned the challenge of volunteers have other things in their lives that take time. And it can be quite difficult to get people to commit the effort you think they should to deliver on their obligations. Got to be realistic about this. So if you phase it, maybe that gets you the start in a way, and you build momentum. Keep the heat on, but keep it going. So that's the race plan. And so there's the big picture. So suddenly we say, I think we should have a plan at a club level. So how do we do that? How do we get traction on that? And the next few slides, let me take you through how I think you could do this. And versions of this I've just done with the Dragon Boats Club. It's the same process, and all this information will be available to you. So first things first, get some facts about your club. Know where it really, really is in its performance, in its and its current world. So gather data that's beyond doubt. The risk of club planning is people go, oh mate, in my opinion, I reckon it's this. And you go, well, I get that. Well, no, I don't. I actually want to know where the facts are. So where are the facts around our current membership? What's the trend line? Is it this, or stagnant? And Shane and Ramsey have got all this data available to you within all their data systems. So what's the age profile? How many people get involved in our events? And I'm just running across here. People that are current membership. You might even go and talk to potential non-members. Who do you go and talk to? Friends, and go, hey, would you come and join our club? Would you be interested in the sport? And it'd be interesting to get some facts around their opinions. Oh, it's not for me, or it's too this, or it's not enough of that, or it's really good, or whatever else. But you might get some insight into your local brand about your sports club, your Dragon Boats Club. So go and get some people-related data, facts. You might equally, in the same process around brand, go and talk to potential stakeholders. This might be the local club if you're looking for a perspective, and it's a great way to start a conversation, which leads to sponsorship, is to go, hey, listen, can I come and talk to you about our sport? I'm not asking for money. What do you think is important, and how do you see us? And then you go and do your plan. You come back to them later and say, hey, here's what happened with our planning process, and would you like to be part of it? So go and talk to current and potential stakeholders, sponsors. How are they seeing your club? Is it everything it says it is on the tin? Or is there other perspectives that are useful to gather? Governance and risk, how are we doing on that? And you had the last session, paddle session one, paddles up, which was around risk and safety. So where are we up to on safety? Have we got that right? There are a number of clues in the last session. How are we doing? Is that an area of focus that we need to put some more effort into? Financial reality goes without saying. Where's our money come from? Where's it go to? Is what we're doing working or not? And events, are they working or not? We might host events of various shapes, regattas and so forth. Well, how are they going? What's the membership like? What's the facts of all of this? And how are we going on the use of technology? Data, tracking and so forth. I know it sounds, for some people it'll be, oh, I don't want to go there. For other people go, oh, why aren't we there? My suggestion to you, as the sport evolves, we need to get more and more into that. And as we do collective racing online with digital, this is part of the future. And social media is part of the future. Communicating with younger people, the audiences we want to attract into, it's all part of technology and data. So let's get some operating data, some operating context material as the first step, and try and get past opinion or biases. And I'll come back to the biases shortly. So you've done some research. I invite all as we did, Shane, I invited all the directors on the board to go and do a bit of research. Gave them a topic, gave them perspective, go and talk to members. I wanted them to come prepared and thoughtful to the session, not just turn up cold going, what do we talk about? Actually, by the time they've done a bit of research and thinking, they're actually halfway into the planning process. Up here, preparation for the workshop, distill all that data. Someone's got to do it. There'll be lots of interesting points. Look for the so what. What's the critical few out of the copious many? Like, here's a really interesting issue. Here's a really interesting opportunity. Here's a really interesting challenge. Let's get that clear in our brains. And make sure that all, as I said, all the workshop participants have got this information in advance, and assume they've read it. It's part of the deal, guys. Turn up, here's a little pack of information that might have been assembled. Doesn't have to be voluminous, but read it, be across it, and have thought about it. Because what you really want to do is avoid a data dump and going back over this in a workshop process. You haven't got a lot of time. Volunteers can't give you endless hours and days to this. So you've got to be refocused around that. So there's a preparation for the workshop. And I like a workshop. It can be done online in this sort of format, best done in person. If you can do that, social distancing and all that activity goes with it. But it's really valuable to do in a person so you can get a sense of the people in the room, how they're feeling and thinking about the future. And you get some other issues. Some people are comfortable in a large group. Some people are not so comfortable. Some people like being online. Others turn their screens off and feel awkward. All that stuff. A workshop in person helps get past some of those impasses if it's possible. So let's run the workshop. Now, you know I'm going to say this, but there's really value in getting an independent someone to run the content, the process. You don't have to pay fancy money for this, but find someone who's not emotionally invested in the process, in the content. But I really want to focus on the process, because you can't be president of the club and run, in my view, and run a really effective planning process that really engages people. I'm going to challenge you and go, get someone independent if you can to just run you through a process, and I'll give you the template in a moment. And that means that the president or whoever else who's leading this push can participate equally in the conversation as well. Minimum 4 hours. It does take time. People have perspectives to offer and all that. You just got to live with, it does take time to do it properly. And don't rush in the first 5 minutes. Don't try and get to an immediate response and get stuff down. Let it roll. Let people have a conversation. I think they'll give you their first perspectives, and then give them a moment to think about it. You'll be astounded what comes second and third thought. So I've got 4 hours. If you can make it 6, bonus. Throw in lunch, throw in afternoon tea, throw in a beer at the end, whatever works as an incentive plan. Make it a pleasant environment if you can. In workshops, bias will occur. We're human. We come with pre-existing perspectives. And so you'll find, and this is where your facilitator can perhaps help you, people will come with, let me give you some example, confirmation bias, which people will be looking for points of view to back up pre-existing points of view. They go, I told you so. I've been waiting for that bit of evidence to come out to back up my point of view. Or you'll have availability bias. Well, I can only think of this, therefore that's enough. When in fact, if you stop and think a bit longer, you'll get more. Recency or emotional drivers will cause people to narrow in their perspectives. A facilitator and having a conversation a bit long will help you work through that if you can. And I always take a few photos, capture it, part of your comms back later on, talking to people, recording the event, record that people were there and involved, not bad. If people are comfortable with that, you can put on social media. Guys who've been club members, who've been thinking about stuff, this is what happened. So there's a workshop process, and you can do it in lots of ways. You've probably been in lots of these. We got flip charts on the wall and post-it notes and all those sorts of devices. Usual stuff. But I'll give you the template in which you might focus, how you might do that. Whatever it is, it's valuable. Get people involved. As I said earlier, some people like a big group and have a big voice. Other people prefer smaller groups and a quiet voice. So give each an opportunity. So as your facilitator or person who's running this drives the day, you might have a whole group session, and then you might have a whole series of small sessions. And that gives pairs of people an opportunity to work together, whereas the group of 10, if that's the number, or 8, come together on other topics. And I'll explain that in a moment. Back end of the workshop. And what are the fears here in workshops? That it goes off the rails, that people back into their corners. My secret to this sort of stuff is, and I make a living out of doing this, is keep chunking people back up to the big picture. So when they get buried and lost down here debating tactical things, take them back up to purpose and vision and go, guys, we still agree that? Yes, let's come down into the strategies and so forth. And as people go up and down through those levels, some will be really big picture people, some will be very tactical people. Both are right. Sometimes they play it in the wrong context. And so the opportunity here is to go, sure, big picture. Now let's get some detail. And if people diving into nth level of detail too much, guys, come back up a bit. And that's the value of a facilitator. It's both, not either. And after the workshop, finish the process, get it typed up, record it, whatever it is, write it up. Big mistake. Shane, you said what the failings are in planning is the immediate follow-up is a real clue to that. So within the next week, write up the notes, doesn't have to be pretty, and circulate it. And circulate it to participants to go, did we get all the points down? And validate it really quickly. And then I would bring the people back together again. Doesn't have to be a long thing, could be like this in Zoom, about 4 weeks later and go, I've been thinking about it. What do you reckon? Let's validate it. Any variations we want to make? What do we want to think about? Feel about right? Can we live with it? That's all you're testing at this point. You go, okay, got it. Right, let's share the plan. And that's when you back out to your members. And that's when you might be going off to stakeholders and go, this is the plan we think is meaningful for the future of this club for the next period of time. And it's not a perfect science, but it's the best we can come to on the evidence we have today. This is what we've landed on. And there it goes. So that's the mechanics of a process. So really it's around preparation, getting into it, enjoying the conversation. You want to make the workshop experience or the conversation pleasant and engaging. You want people to do, oh, that was good. I'd like to do that again. Or I'd like to contribute, looking for volunteers here. So that's the plan. So this template thing, let me just give you, this will be available to you as a document, but this is that very fancy glossy document I did at the front. This is it in its most basic elements. So you've got a purpose, which is the reason we exist as a club. That may come easily. It might take a bit of time. What's the reason we exist? And as I worked with Dragons Abreast Sydney, it was really interesting for them to think about who they were targeting and how we support women and a very difficult personal experience. So they drew their purpose out of that particular frame. You might have others. Gather the purpose first, reason for existence. And then vision. Look ahead. 3 years. Try and go post-COVID. Let's see if we can lift our horizon, lift our sights beyond that. And what do we want to achieve as a club, as a group of people? Certainly want to leave a club that's viable, that has a future life. But what else is in your vision? What do you want? And that's a thoughtful conversation. Those can be group conversations, whole group conversations. And then out of the Dragon Boat strategic plan is those 6 columns there. Now you don't have to take all 6. You might take 4 of those, for example. So you might take members and clubs, our events, our assets, our brand. You could stop there. Why not put financial on the end of it? So maybe 5. Don't know. But you don't need necessarily to fill every box if you can't. Don't force fit it. And some strategies. How are we going to get to what we aspire to for our members? How are we going to get to in making improvements in our events? And some of these might be quite tactical. Some of it might be very high level. It's okay. It's part of the evolving nature of it. Take the clues from the Dragon Boat strategic plan. That will give you some perspective. And underneath, as I said before, performance indicators. How do we know we're going to get there? What's the measure? How do we know we've been successful? For example, if you were to add 5 new members per club, a net of 5 new members per club in New South Wales, that might be a performance indicator, which is around, and a measure, which is around actual growth of a target, of our membership target. Do you know that would add 10% to the membership of New South Wales in 1 year if 60 clubs added 5? And we would blow away all the issues of membership trends and so forth, just like that. So there's an example at club level. We might have something about we want to attract new people. We might want to put a grant in. As I mentioned at the AGM, if you were there, the next 12 months in New South Wales government, there is going to be a frenetic effort to put money into regions and put money into community and into that money into sport. So maybe under our assets or infrastructure, might be time to go and pitch for a government grant. Now might be the chance where they're really open to it. There's something about your brand and your communications. Maybe it needs some work. You could put it there. We want people to have a positive view. There's your performance indicator of your club in your region. And if your soundings of your stakeholders give you otherwise, you might have some clues about what you focus on. And there's an example. And you could run a workshop just to that page. There it is. It doesn't need to be more complicated than that. I'm a big one about keeping it simple. There are thousands of management texts about planning. I keep it really simple. You may have your own iteration off your own professional careers. I don't mind. Keep it simple and keep it achievable. Aspiration grounded in reality, and less is more. Don't overcook it. You can always come back and add more on. Don't overcook it. So there's the top end. That's like the strategic plan, but at a club level. There's your plan at the top end of it. So a couple of other templates you've got available to you will be, what is this? How do we make it break down a bit? And so you might take it this way for over 2 years. Year one, we might do something. In year two, we might do something else. Oh, let's put some names against it. Who's going to lead this? Who's going to be the front person? Doesn't mean they have to do all the work, but who's going to keep nudging it along? And so there's the 2-year version of the process. And you might have some white boxes with nothing in it in year one, but in year two, you'll get started because you sequence your activities and you get the progressive build up and the success, the things I mentioned earlier. So that's that. Or you may even go down to a 1-year version. Same logic. I like to use 90-day cycles of activity and go, okay, we've got 90 days. What can we achieve in 90 days? The answer is probably not a lot. But if we take small bites, this is how we execute a plan. And call it a race plan. You've got race plans all the time in how you do your work, how you set up your club for success as you go into prepare and conduct races and so forth. Same thing. Break it down quarter by quarter. Members, same important goals are all there, but with a quarterly focus. So that sets another way of looking at it. So those 3 templates are available to you. Shane's got those as Word documents. You can populate that. And if your plan looked like that page filled out with one of these pages, then your plan is done. And then the challenge is how to execute it. And this is where, great intent falls over. So you've got to find people put their hands up, volunteers. I'll run with this for a quarter, or I'll run with this for a period, and actually do what you agreed to. And for others, not to sit back and go, well, I'm waiting for person X to do their activity. No, support each other. If you're at a committee level, support each other and maybe even help out on each other's tasks. You do this in business and corporate and government land, if for those still working, or you did it when you were working, same stuff. Help your teammates to get this across the line. And keep each other in the loop on progress. Like I'm doing this, it's working pretty well. We've got endless communication mediums. You can just update it, make a WhatsApp group for this. A small subset of Facebook group, I don't mind. Just keep each other in the loop. This is working really well, got some traction, thought I'd let you know. And it builds momentum. Also, as you measure this and you go along and go, actually, no, that didn't work. I thought it was going to be this, it turned out to be much bigger. Oh, okay, so let's make some adjustments. We can recalibrate the roadmap based on lessons learned. It's not a set and forget. I think this is a dynamic document on the back end of a dynamic process. And if you make it too static, you'll lose people. And you'll get disappointed. I should caution though, being too dynamic, let's push that off. Let's push that off. Suddenly you end up with nothing happening. So it's an interesting judgment of the committee here about how much do you allow it to be dynamic? And you go, no, come on, we've got to put the effort in. Let's get on with it now. That's a conversation that goes on. And you keep your members involved. The communications need to flow. How do you tell them? Hey, we're up to this, and link it back. So for example, you will hear from Shane talking about tribe over coming months, weeks. Shane, I'll jump into that if I may. Tribe's a new event. It's been run. If you follow some of the Facebook pages, it's been trialled in various clubs. So Shane will spend a lot of time going, here's the tribe. Oh, it's linked to our strategic plan when we said we'd set up new events. So we link for the purpose of keeping members involved. We're going to link stuff together for you and keep you abreast of that. Same with your club members and your stakeholders. This is where we're up to. You give them a 6 monthly report card, if that was useful. And Shane, you've got a version of that with icons and red, greens and yellows on it, traffic lights. Doesn't have to be complicated, but actually it's a really good marketing tool to your members and to your sponsors and stakeholders. So this is an overarching process. And the idea being, if I come back to summary, that a club plan should give a sense of direction and purpose. And even in the middle of turbulence around COVID and other things, it gives you something to look beyond. People are looking for a bit more control and structure. A plan does that. As I said at the outset, a plan well constructed might give you a sense of what we will do and what we won't do. I've mentioned already building momentum, sequencing activities, adapting and learning, engaging with your members. So that's why I think a plan is valuable. You may have versions of this. So if you've got a version that achieves the same thing, well done. You don't have to go and reinvent it. If you're starting from square one, then maybe other clubs nearby within your region have got something to share with you and adapt. Shane is certainly going to have all these templates and that can give you a perspective. So for people on the call, I'm happy to take questions. I've rushed through a quick overview of planning. There's far more to it behind the scenes, and I'm happy to give perspective either in this call now and I'll have this later on. That's me, and I'm happy to take questions as well in those mediums. But Shane, you can give that information. So what's on the chat line? Shane, questions? Where are we going?
Mate, look, I've got some questions before I throw it to the floor. And again, if you've got questions, please hold them. But I've written down a few, actually. I've kind of gone rogue on you. But you mentioned, we talk about KPIs. They can be really good, but they can also be dangerous. How do you balance and use that measurement to be successful? Because you've got some that can be so specific that it leaves you no room to move. And if you don't achieve it, it's automatic failure versus not having it at all, which is far, you mentioned this before, far too flexible. How do you get that balance right?
Oh, Shane, it's a judgment. It's difficult. So there's no magic formula. And it depends on the mentality of the leadership group as well, about how you use that. If they're being really constricting and saying, okay, you haven't got within 0.1 of whatever the performance indicator is, that's not helpful. Equally, having nothing is not helpful. It's a bit like New Year's Eve resolutions. Now we make them, we've got to get on and get up doing, and we've got to, if it's stopping doing something or changing patterns, you've actually got to do it. You've got to measure it, use that as an analogy, and adapt. And if you find it's too constricting, adapt. But be honest. This is about honesty, Shane. You know when you're fluffing.
Yeah, dead right.
You know when you're fluffing on New Year's Eve resolutions. You know.
So you mentioned adapt. I think now is a pretty it's been a really tough time for perhaps 12 months or so. First, there's fires, there's drought, now there's COVID. How does a committee, a club, an organisation have that conversation about pivoting from the various topics to another? How do they do that where they've spent their 4 hours, they've got the data, they've done their research, they've done all that, and it hasn't necessarily we've come up with a factor that's outside of our control. How do we pivot and have that conversation with our committee to make those changes?
So so for example, drought or COVID has thrown us off course. Is that what you're thinking, Shane?
Any environmental factor could have thrown us off course. How do we have that conversation? Use drought. There's some clubs with no water. So how do we have that conversation when we say, things have got to change, we've got to toss that one or shelve it and pivot?
And for me, one of the filters for that is, do we have control of it? And do we control the response? So if we've got no water, we've got to adapt to something else, obviously. We had to adapt, and you've seen this as a sport over the last 12 months with smoke, temperature, drought. the sport kept on adapting and we kept on trying new things. So one of our values is about innovation. And so for me, I look for where's the control? Can we do something about this? Yes or no? Okay, let's have a meaningful conversation. Is this important at the moment now to pivot in a different direction?
No, I think that's fair. Just out of curiosity on the line, just raise through your little reactions. Does all clubs have a strategic plan? Roger, can you just unshare your screen so we can see everyone in one hit? Just
thumbs up. You've got one. Who's got one? You've got to come back off the black screen now, if you could.
Or even use there's a reactions emoji down the bottom. Just use that. Does everyone have a strategic plan?
Not sure.
Oh, there's a thumbs up. Thumbs up. It's good. Thank you.
So Roger, like even with the not sure comment, one thing that can break it. You could have all these strategic plans, and you and I have heard, and I'm sure you have more so. I've got a plan, and often just sits on the shelf because you haven't had that buy-in, or you haven't had. I'm not sure who said. I'm not sure. It was Rhonda. Like if they're not sure that, either not selling it properly, or we haven't got the buy-in. So how do we overcome that? And how do we keep the momentum building?
Come back to the start and the preparation. So there's an agreement we need to have a document, and you could leverage any form of impetus for that. You could say Dragon Boats New South Wales has got one and they've invited us to have one, whatever the starting point is. But rather than try and deal with the end state, come back. So a good process, well constructed, engaging people, a logic for why we're doing this, and a process that's fair and reasonable will lead you to, in most cases, a critical mass of support. Let me be really honest here. Having been a president of a sports club, you will not get 100% support. There will be naysayers and critics, and we haven't had a few of those around the board table, Shane, over time.
Is it the 80-20 rule?
Yeah, for me, probably 65-35. Enough to get on with it and say, listen, for the naysayers, don't impede us. We're going to get on and have a go at this. Because what I've also learned is that people then, oh, you have got traction, and they come and join in. So don't get demotivated if people aren't engaged 100% all of the time right from the start. Look for a critical mass and build on it. And some, as I said, will take a longer period of time to come onto the topic. Some will never get there. So Roger, be real about that.
One thing I hear, and it doesn't matter what sport you're involved in, is the expectation or comparing yourself, just apples to apples. I think it's important. This is just me speaking. I think it's important to be ambitious, but it's also important to be realistic. I've heard many a time that we say, "Oh, well, the NRL's doing this. Why aren't we doing that?" I mean, I can answer that, quite easily. But how do you manage, from your perspective, particularly at club level, and the ones who are, and I saw it on the chat line, there's a few ones undergoing a review in their strategy. How do you bring that down to a realistic level, like aim high, but not so unrealistic as you mentioned before that you're going to fail?
I've used the phrase already, aspiration, ground and reality. So you want to stretch it a bit. There'll be people who naturally go to very big picture and are really comfortable there. Let's, be the best club in Australia. Got it. There'll be other people for whom that is just impossible. And so they're far more pragmatic. What are we going to do in the next 2 months? And so there's an imbalance, Shane, between those perspectives. So where do you land? Aspiration, ground and reality. Start small and build. And if you find your aspiration was too small, then adapt and build on it. If it was too big and too exotic and it was NRL level, not local club level, then okay, well, that didn't work. Bring it back down. Let's be honest. And for me, if a plan's not guiding the future of the club, the decision-making, the governance, then it's probably not right.
Yeah, I think your point is key, flexibility, but within reason as well.
Yeah.
Just for the ones who don't have too much experience in strategic planning or think they're experts and want to get better, what education do you recommend that they can actually start looking at this kind of stuff? Is there short courses? I mean, without going to do a three uni course or a master's degree, is there anything short? Is there YouTube? What do you recommend?
it's a challenge. There's thousands of books and libraries on this particular topic. Everybody's got their particular model and view. Everybody's seen something that they like. For me, I just keep it. Yes, you could probably look on YouTube, but it'll have the same thing, and there'll be language that'll trip you up. Is it a KPI, KPO, critical success factor, KRA, goal, objective? Oh, it gets too complicated.
Yeah, it's get out of the weeds part.
For me, it talks about where and why are we going there? What's our aspiration? What are the big important things we need to get right? So I use a highly sophisticated term, bits. What are the half dozen bits, big, important things we've got to get right? How do we know we're going on that? And how are we going to roadmap it, execute it, get it going? It doesn't need to be more complicated than that, in my view. We don't have time for fancy stuff. That's corporate land or government land, not for a volunteer club. Let's just keep it relevant.
So in your opinion, I guess, where do organisations go wrong, in terms of the planning and what should they avoid? And then I guess conversely, Roger, do you have any tips on, I guess, 3 on each, what to avoid and what to focus on?
So things to focus on is that it's a process. So if you start at step 4 of the process, don't expect success. So work through the sequence, gather the data, think about it, engage with the people in a process, and do stuff at the end. It's a process, and make it fun and enjoyable. Make it a pleasant experience. If it becomes hard work, people go, "I know, it's too hard. I'm not going to contribute now." That seems a waste. So follow the process and align it to, this is meaningful. We want to invest some time. And then put it into an achievable, bite-sized execution plan. Don't overcook it. Don't make it too big. And Bill Gates uses a great line that says we overestimate what we can do in 2 years and underestimate what we can do in 10. So it'll take a while to get momentum. And if we look at the board level, Shane, it took us 18 months, 2 years to get successes and a track record we were happy with in order now to go on to the next level. So, be realistic about that. Overcook it with no execution plan, you're going to fall into a trap. And then the other trap is leaving it on one person's shoulder. You go, oh, well, he's going to do that or she's going to do that. I'll wait for them to do their bit. And you're not actually working collectively as a club. This is an all-in activity, not just we'll wait for the president to do it. Or wait for the person who's got a passion for this to do it. If you're not in together, collaborative, we're missing something here. Does that answer it, Shane?
No, it does. I think that last point is vitally important, is that, which sort of leads to the buy-in, but don't just rely on the one. If you rely on the one person, it's already an unsustainable model. So avoid that.
Yep. And bring the brains together. There'll be someone who's been in the club 10 years and someone who's been in there 10 minutes. Each of them have got a valuable perspective.
That's right.
And in terms of brand, the new member may give you a perspective that you don't really want to hear, but you need to give them voice and be thoughtful about what you're hearing. And for the 10-year person, there is merit in saying, yeah, we had a go at this. I'm going to counter that by saying COVID has shuffled so many things around that what didn't work 3 years ago might now work because there's a different context in our community, in our receptiveness. If I take my perspective on that, I'm seeing people are now looking for exercise, community, fun, engagement, and we do that in Dragon Boats like that. So it might be now that you go and talk to, I don't know, places of membership and go, actually, we've got a service and a product here, fabulous, come and join us. And when there's other things closed off and not available, they might go, actually, I might give you a second thought. I might come and join you. And so that leads to try days, how do we do that, and so forth. And then becomes your action plan.
Might throw it to the floor. Well, we've got 10 minutes to ask questions. I know that there's some clubs who we've already said they are reviewing their strategic plan. There's some who don't have any, where to start. I want to throw it to the floor. Don't be shy. Most of you are blanked your screen anyway, so feel free to ask Roger some questions. Before I start picking names.
Oh, go. Thank you. Oh, Rob, go. You win the prize. You're up.
I was just listening for everyone else.
Go, Rob.
Oh, well, no, I didn't really have any question, but well, I'll probably take part of what you've been saying. I've been writing a few notes, and I'll take it away, partly for club stuff, but also in my suite coordinator role. There's a few things that have been coming to mind, which I might be able to implement or put forward and discuss with the other coordinators.
Bingo. This is just a framework for thinking, Rob. Thank you. And it applies same logic down through. So if you take your sweep, how are we doing on sweeps? What's the data? How do we plan to grow the quality and quantity of our sweeps and so forth? Just a way of approaching the topic. I'm really pleased.
One thing that only came to mind today, and it's again based on a question from somebody, a phone call, etc. And I see Kathy's on the line, so she might have some ideas. Is sweep clinics at the moment, because of social distancing, we're not looking to run any group clinics within the Greater Sydney region, but maybe there is a mechanism for doing things like this, where it's not so much practical, but theoretical workshops, and something that maybe as a group we can work towards. Oh, I get a thumbs up from Gabrielle. Thank you.
We love that. Good on you. Just so, this is the use of technology and data that I had in the plan that I described. How do we do some of the things we've done before differently? Because we're compelled to, Rob. Thank you for that. And when we get back together in the boat, fabulous, got that. But in the meantime, we can maintain momentum and keep some level of skills up and engagement up. It's got it. Thank you. Any other comments? Someone want to launch in? Go.
Hi, I'm Vijay from Mavericks. There's a challenge that we face when it comes to our club, where we have a lower number of members, first of all, and then even lower number of members interested in being part of the committee that runs the club. And then there's also this part where you have to be democratic with everyone. And if you don't keep the people who are there in the meeting happy, then there's a possibility you might actually end up losing them. So it's always like walking on thin ice every direction we look at. So just like we're just not able to go beyond that hurdle to actually be able to say, we can make some hard decisions and say, no, this is the direction we want to go to. If you're not happy, if you're not on board, I'm sorry, you have to keep your side.
Vijay, a great observation of volunteer organisations. Yeah. Where you've got to keep on influencing and have it. For me, the question I would pose, what's the cost of doing nothing? If we just tick as long as we are now, will we still be here in 5 years' time? Don't give it a year or two, toss it out 5 years. When some of the current members might have decided to give up and not play. But what's the legacy we're going to leave here? Do we want to have a club? Yes or no? And if no, let's bring that to the surface right now. And maybe we go and merge with another club, and rather than drag this thing on in a painful way, you go, if we don't have enough support for our club, our brand, and what we're trying to do, let's call it and maybe go and merge with someone else. The challenge is, and I came back to before, critical mass rather than 100%. There will be naysayers. I'm going to go. There's empty threats. I get all that. If you don't do what I said, then I'm going to leave, and you can't afford to lose me. You see lots of that in volunteer organisations. You've just got to have belief in what you're trying to do, impart some energy, talk about a bigger picture, and on you go. And you've got to persevere. Question coming in from Carolyn: aging and trying to get younger paddlers is becoming difficult. Yes, it is. So 5 years from now, you may not have a club. We did some stats, Shane, you could probably share those. Within 10 years, this sport would be, with no change, will not be a viable sport. Now that would be a tremendous loss. This is a great sport, great opportunity, great energy, deep history, 2,000 years of history, links internationally. If we let this slip through our fingers, that would just be a waste.
Also goes back to what you're saying, with the vision. What do we want to achieve? For some, the clubs, it might not be viable initially in the short term to actually attract the younger ones, from the get-go. And it goes back to those phases. Bring in those phases, realistic phases to actually make that happen. If you have an average age in your club of, I'm just going to say 65, it's going to be very difficult for you to attract all of a sudden someone who is 13 or 14 years old.
Can I jump on that one though? 'Cause I'm conscious of time, Shane. Had a conversation at the AGM. I'm not sure if that person is on this call. They said, we've been approached by a school and the tribe format can be done in a swimming pool. And so the conversation we had was, gosh, you could actually go and do a Wednesday something sport. If you've got some retired members who are able to do this and go, okay, let's go and run a schools program. 2 hours paddling, high energy, lots of fun with a tribe concept, and do it once a fortnight. You're actually got a reason to engage with the younger demographic. You'd like to think that some of those will go, oh, and you could tell them, by the way, you could be wearing green and gold for Australia at the schools international campaign inside 12 months. And I bet there is another sport in Australia where you could be representing Australia inside 12 months from a novice standing. So other part of that, we need to be welcoming to young people. So if you do have an age demographic of 65, then you've got someone coming in at 14 or 15. We need to change the way we conduct ourselves and talk about our sport and so forth in order to attract them. If we're talking like 65-year-olds to 15-year-olds, you know it with your own kids, it's gone. Or your own grandchildren, it's gone. Got one opportunity.
Any other questions regarding strategic planning, execution, club organisation? Just nods around the room. Does all that make sense? Does everyone have a far better idea on how to create a plan, how to execute it, how to have these conversations with their members to create a more viable club and then, you know, ultimately sport?
I hope you're taking a little bit.
Yeah, dead right.
It's a fun and engaging process. I say that because I'm biased, because I love doing it and I do it for a living. The plan is just an artifact. It's an output of the process. It's actually an engaging conversation with your club mates. That's what you're really doing.
I think sometimes with what we do with our club is, instead of calling it a strategic plan, which I know that's the right term, can also be a bit scary and daunting on a lot of people because they consider it to be this big thing. So what we tend to do is we just pick a particular goal or a couple of goals depending on the size of the goal and just call it a goal for the season.
Magic.
And sometimes that may work better for some clubs than actually presenting it as a strategic plan. And, you know, number one for us always is growth. We don't target really young because of our location of where we are, but we do try and target a little bit younger each time to slowly get down there instead of going, yeah, our average age is 55, 56, and yeah, we're going to go and target 15-year-olds because we know that that's not going to work. It really isn't from today to tomorrow. But if you target from 55 but then start aiming for 45, then maybe the next quarter you start down and you slowly work down. Yeah.
Beautiful, beautiful, Kathy. And in fact, 45 and bring your child with you, who's a 12-year-old.
Yep. You
can do it, mum and dad's, you know, family battles, for example. So you're right. Let's keep it realistic in your context. It doesn't have to be a purist version like this. It could be one goal this season. Let's really work at it and build confidence. And the committee might have a broader view of, I think there's a few goals, but let's just do this one for the next period. And it's an ongoing process.
I'm just, this will be the last question. So I'm just having a quick read of what Fiona's just said.
Okay.
Okay.
The guides we can get. And again, you can come back to Shane. I'm pointing to you, Shane, top left-hand corner. And Ramsey, if you could take a photo or record of the people here, because wouldn't it be interesting to connect all these people together in a conversation and going, how are you going with your club? You're on this call because I presume you're interested in the topic. And if you've got some stuff going, there's how many, 8, 10, 12, 15 people here. You could actually share a few perspectives amongst the 15 and go, I tried this. Kathy said I tried this. And then Wayne's having a go at this and Rob's tried this. share it. You don't have to do it on your own. You don't have to be perfect by yourself.
And I hope you do that, because I think that's a KP. That's also part of the strategic plan of DBNSW, where clubs start working with each other to actually start building. And it's these types of forums that can actually be achieved. So a simple thing, going back to what Kathy said, a simple goal. You're actually going through the same process
Absolutely.
in reality. I might call it there. It seems as though the chat line, everyone around, there's a lot more confidence going around. So I do want to thank Roger in particular for actually leading this. For those who don't know, as I mentioned before, Roger spent 3 years on the board, created 2 strategic plans, and good ones. To work for, you know, multinationals, being able to work with a smaller sport like us and create tangible projects that we can actually, you know, execute is, I think, is an art. And you've done that well, to work for, say, Big 4 firms and us. You know, that's unreal. So you've done a tremendous job on that. And to everyone online, thank you again, because this is something that we really hope that you get a lot of benefit of. The next topic, I think we're talking social media and how to leverage that to actually communicate with your members and build on what we've basically just talked about. And I think Kathy mentioned growth. So how do we actually use that to leverage our sport from a whole different raft of ways: commercial, growth in participation, general communication, etc. So that's the next topic, which will be next month. This interview will be online. It's on the DBNSW website, and it will be under the upskill section, or the resource sharing, just like the last session was. So if you go to dbnsw.org.au, you'll find the last session, which is all about risk and safety and how to apply it at clubs, as well as this session, which will be up there in the coming week or so. But to everyone, thank you again for coming online to our Paddles Up session. It's number 2, and hopefully we can continue the good trend that we're getting, and most importantly, teach you all a lot more than you, I guess, came online with.
Cool. Thank you, Shane. Thank you for the
Roger.
opportunity. Good luck. And Shane, you've got my contact details, so I'm always happy to help out as appropriate.
Like always, please sing out. You've got all our details, and the templates will be online for you to share. Please sing out if you need help, as Roger's got his details on there before. Happy to help, but you enjoy your night. I think it's very much time to eat soon.
Got it. Let's do that. Thank you.
See you guys. Thank you.